What are the best landing spots for free agent and rookie running backs for Fantasy Outlook? We will rank our top 10 teams on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am one of your hosts, Michelle Magdziuk. When I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst over at NFL.com.
Yeah, and I'm your other host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL, fantasy, and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We have a great show for you today. I'm very excited. So Vinnie and I are going to rank our top 10 favorite landing spots for free agent and rookie running backs this offseason in terms of their 2024 fantasy outlook. So right off the top, I thought of 3 great landing spots, and I want to hear your thoughts on it and which one that you think is the best. So right at the top, I have a top 3 tier here. It's the Ravens, the Texans, and the Cowboys. I don't know if the Texans deserve to be in here, but I want you to rank these 3 teams. And would this be your same top 3?
Yeah, I think it would. And we also learned about the Cowboys potentially moving on from Tony Pollard, which helps put them right in the mix here. So look at the Ravens. Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins are free agents. They have no interest in bringing back Edwards. Dobbins is always hurt, so you wouldn't think they would go in that direction. So that leaves a void. They're not going to cycle in one of these guys they've had before, Latavius Murray or Devonta Freeman or Melvin Gordon. None of these guys are going to be the answer. They're going to look for a legitimate upgrade. Now, they could look to the draft, but they have been rumored that they're the odds-on favorite to land Derrick Henry. So what does that say? They're looking for a power running back. That's what Gus Edwards did, scoring 13 touchdowns last year. They're looking for someone to finish drives, help in this offense, and we know it's a little different offense. They're opening up the passing game now with Todd Monken, so they need a finisher, a guy that can smash home and make these plays. They already have the speedster, so keep that in mind. Keaton Mitchell, should he return and recover well, they have that type of back. So, yeah, he's a player that we're going to watch, but again, he's coming off a major injury. He's an undrafted guy, smaller side. He's got a lot of speed, but what I think based on this offense, throwing downfield, and spreading the field, I think you need a power back, and that's why Derrick Henry has been rumored to take over for these 2 guys.
Yeah, I think this one's so easy to put what guy would be the best spot. It's Derrick Henry, right? I mean, and I do think the Ravens are easily the best landing spot for any running back. They were middle of the pack last year in rush attempts for running backs among all teams, but all their guys were hurt, right? They didn't have the guy they wanted to go into the season with. J.K. Dobbins tore his Achilles in week 1. So I do think that would have been higher if they had their pieces that they wanted. Now, the running back still did score 20 rushing touchdowns. Who knows if that keeps up, but they have a really good run blocking offensive line. Lamar Jackson makes everything so easy for them. They're a top tier offense that scores a lot of points. So this is just a great spot. If it's not Derrick Henry, I think a guy like Josh Jacobs could be a good fit too if they wanted to go cheaper. Another power back out there is Zach Moss, but that would be going much lower than obviously Henry. I would say I think the Cowboys are probably the next best landing spot over the Texans just because of we know what their offense is, right? Number 1 offense last year in points per game. The running back should have been the starting running back and the number 1 offense in the NFL should have been so much better than what Tony Pollard was for fantasy. We know he was a big letdown. What do you foresee happening in this backfield? Because they have to pay Parsons pretty soon here, and then also extend Dak Prescott. So it's not like they have a ton to spend either.
Yeah, they got to think about that and the CeeDee Lamb contract. So there's a lot of things that's on the Cowboys' minds, the front office, which is the Joneses here. So let's not kid ourselves. These are the guys making the decisions, and they're going to look at running back, and they're smart enough to realize we do invest highly in running backs from time to time, Ezekiel Elliott being an example, but they are also smart enough to know when we need to move on and save some money. And Tony Pollard is not like he's been there forever and there's a loyalty there that Jerry Jones had with Elliott, and they felt like they kept him on a little too long. Pollard has flashed for 1 year, and that again was with Kellen Moore, who's now in Philadelphia. So you figure that is a great landing spot for him if he should move on. We'll talk about the Eagles a little bit more, but the Cowboys, I don't think they're going to go with Rico Dowdle. He's not going to be their lead back here. They want somebody special. And I think it's open up for anybody. We looked at Henry and Jacobs. They've been tied to this team too, but think about that. Those guys were more tied to if Pollard stays, right? To bring back that Elliott element. But maybe they're looking for a more complete back, dynamic back that can be on the field and have that versatility and explosiveness. So maybe they look in the draft. They've been tied a lot to Brooks, their successor at Texas, to what they had with Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson. So when you look at him, he's a good runner. I think Blake Corum was a little too small here, but they could look at Braylon Allen of Wisconsin. He would be a good fit as well in what they're trying to do. So I think the Cowboys more likely are going to go the rookie route, right? They're not going to invest a lot. If they've got a free agent running back, and I think that goes with any of those teams, with the Chargers and the Ravens, to some degree, but I think I meant more to say the Titans. Moving on from Derrick Henry, like if they go and replace that player, it's going to be more with a young player. But I think it's any of these teams. I would say the Raiders, the Giants, the Cowboys, these teams that had that high investment in a running back last year and it didn't work out, they're more likely to go in the direction of a younger back, I think.
I'll say Saquon Barkley with this Cowboys offense would be so beautiful. I would love it so much. And also they could use more pass catchers too, right? So he would
Yeah.
add that element. It's not just a running back. I don't know if they can afford a guy like Barkley. Maybe they bring back Zeke Elliott and maybe sign a guy like Devin Singletary to kind of have the
Yeah,
speed
that's
and
probably
the power for cheaper here. And then the last in the top three, the Texans. Now, last year, it's not like Devin Singletary was amazing. Dameon Pierce wasn't anything. And they actually did have the 12th most carries among running backs in all the NFL last year. And it was with Devin Singletary and Dameon Pierce. Like, if they could get a guy in here that's actually super talented, I do think they would run even more. We still have Bobby Slowick there as OC. We know he comes from the 49er system. He knows how important the run game is. I think this would be a really, really nice landing spot for Josh Jacobs. He faced a heavy box so often with the Raiders because the offense was just atrocious, right? But in this offense, it's going to be spread open. He's going to have so much room to run. I think Josh Jacobs could really shine here, and this could be the best landing spot for his fantasy value.
Yeah, the other player I've thought about a lot, and if the Chargers want to, or the Texans want to borrow from the Chargers and therefore borrow from the 49ers with Bobby Slowick, they might want to get Austin Eckler in there. If this is a pass-first offense and they just need a little of a veteran juice here out of the backfield for checkdowns, I could definitely see Eckler being that guy in this role and just be very confident. He's a good veteran leader to have on a team. So that would be a good presence to add to this offense, which is still relatively young. I mean, if CJ Stroud, Tank Dell going into year two, we'll see what they do with Dalton Schultz. He would be the most senior member of this team. They're looking to wrap up Nico Collins here. So I like Eckler. I like Jacobs. These are some options there that the Texans could consider. Again, you look at last year, you're right. I mean, Dameon Pierce, they tried to make it work in the new offense. It's not exactly directly the 49ers running scheme. It is a bit of a hybrid scheme here. So Pierce, I think, actually was a pretty good zone runner 2 years ago, but he kind of was a misfit in exactly what they want to do because they asked for a little bit more out of their running back. Devin Singletary kind of has not fit into a hole as a runner. He's kind of all over the place. So they were able to get a little bit more production from him with the offensive line. But I think you're going to see going forward, the Texans, I think this is going to be a pass first team. And again, I think they add more of a receiving type, like a Christian McCaffrey or someone in that role first that can be a little bit more dynamic. So we know Jacobs can do that as well. So I think their options are open, but I would expect the Texans, again, if you don't have a lot invested in your running back and you were disappointed, you're more likely to go out and get a free agent.
Yeah, I just think this is the best fit out there for them. That would get me very excited. I'm not excited at all for Josh Jacobs for fantasy next year, but if he lands here, I will
I need
change my
these three
mind.
spots, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
we're
brought up
taking.
how you brought up how Austin Eckler is most likely leaving the Chargers. I have them in our next tier of teams, so we'll get to that shortly here after our first break to hear from a couple of our sponsors.
All right. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football, as we told you at the top, is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's America's #1 sportsbook. It's time to get in on the action with buckets with your first bet here. The NBA is in full swing as we get toward the playoff stretch here because right now new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. I've got a good one for you, and we talked about it yesterday a little bit, but the Bucks and Hornets are playing on Thursday, so you want to get in Giannis. I would maybe go for his points, rebounds, whatever you want with Giannis. I think the Hornets are better, but Giannis is still really great, and so I really like him as a way you can go for a parlay. And if you get a bet that wins, you'll get $150. Any winning $5 bet will get you there. And you can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, like I just mentioned, exclusive props that they have. Giannis is a great one to start with, and a lot more. So just visit fanduel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? Read a book, go out to dinner, get a workout in. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. I personally utilize online therapy over the past few years. It has helped me an incredible amount with my anxiety, irritability. I can't say enough good things about my experience with my therapist. And I just think everyone could benefit themselves by going to therapy. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And you don't have to stress because you can switch therapists at any time with no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. I mentioned right before at the end of the last segment here, the Chargers, they're at the top of this next tier for me, right? There's other teams. There's the Vikings, there's the Eagles, there's the Bengals. I kind of put them all into the same tier here, but I do think the Chargers would be a fantastic landing spot if Eckler is definitely to leave. If he leaves, I will say the backfield last year for the Chargers atrocious, right? 27th in running back carries, 31st in yards per carry, 22nd in rushing touchdowns among running backs. But they get Greg Roman now, right, taking over as OC. They get Jim Harbaugh as their new head coach. He's a power football type guy. He's going to want to run the ball. Their biggest issue is their offensive line. They had the worst run blocking offensive line last year. If they can fix that this offseason, focus on that, I think this could turn out to be the best landing spot for any of these guys.
Yeah, it just depends how much the Chargers are going to continue to throw to that running back. It's been a high volume passing game, and Eckler has been the receiving forward type back. He's not the traditional back. So, how much are they going to go to their traditional running game? I think the ideal fit here is Saquon Barkley. We've talked about him for those other teams, but there actually has been some talk about Jim Harbaugh loving Barkley and wanting to have him in the backfield and signaling a pivot here in the philosophy of this team where they're going to be a lot more balanced here. And they need a workhorse because, again, Eckler's a free agent. Joshua Kelly's a free agent. As Michelle mentioned, they were one of the worst running teams. They'll probably become one of the best because we know the Chargers are probably going to invest in the offensive line pretty well here, especially in the draft. They might consider upgrading tight end with some blocking help over Gerald Everett as well. So all of a sudden, if you have some inline help with the blocking, you're up front a little bit better on the interior, you can actually have a very productive running game. So Chargers are going to be appealing because, again, they want to make a splash here. They do have some money issues. That's going to maybe prevent some things. They might have to make some tough decisions with Mike Williams and others here and maybe go in a different direction. So that could prohibit them to get Saquon Barkley. But again, we know this market could be lowered and you could have a way to finagle that if you're looking for a veteran back. So again, there's a bunch of options for the Chargers. You could also go to the draft and very familiar player for Jim Harbaugh, Blake Corum, a smaller back, but he's available there probably in the second or third round if the Chargers want to go after him. So I would not sleep on that fit. And if Corum lands there, it's going to be a really good landing spot.
Yeah, and they can save money pretty easily. They can save over 50 million bucks in cap space. So just cutting Khalil Mack and Mike Williams. So
Yeah.
they can figure it out. I'll say one cheaper option. I would love to see it just because I'm such a big fan of him. I do think Zach Moss would be a good fit here. He's a power back.
Mhm.
I think he's a guy that both of these coaches would really like. We know that he can have a lot of volume. He could take a lot of volume and then also get those tough yards. He's an underrated pass catcher. I kind of like, I would love that landing spot for him personally. Now, these next three, it's the Vikings where Kevin O'Connell has been talking up Ty Chandler this week, but is Ty Chandler really? They cannot go into the season next year with just Ty Chandler. Like they're going to bring in competition. There's the Philadelphia Eagles, who pretty much all their running backs are free agents, including DeAndre Swift, who was their lead back last year. And then I did add the Bengals in this mix just because of how much they can save if they cut Joe Mixon, and I don't see how they don't. Right. So among these three, what would you say is the next best landing spot?
Well, I think it's the Eagles because they have established themselves as being a very good running team when wanted. And I know when you look at Jalen Hurts, he pilfered a lot of the short touchdowns last year, but that's because they didn't have a back that they trusted the way they liked Miles Sanders in the offense the previous year. I know Sanders is nothing special, but at least he was running well in this offense, had a chance to have some explosive plays. Where DeAndre Swift had one big game early in the season. It came against the Vikings. And then it was not a lot there. Now he's a free agent. Boston Scott has been a reliable kind of swing back for them for a while, used in all kinds of ways. He's a free agent. Rashad Penny, I thought he was going to have a bigger role with this team last year, but they just never got on the same page with him and the offense. Now it's a new offense with Kellen Moore. So we've mentioned a lot about Tony Pollard. If he goes to the Eagles, I'm going to be a lot more excited about his prospects there than I was him solo with the Cowboys last year. That's how high I would be on him getting back with Kellen Moore. So something to look at. And then maybe the Vikings look at DeAndre Swift, right? I think this is going to be a pass first offense. He's a good receiver, and I think you have to use him in that role. And I think he was a little bit miscast. The Eagles, they're not a team that checks down a lot. Like their check down version is Jalen Hurts running. So I didn't think it was a good fit at all for Swift last year when they made that trade. But the Vikings actually could work out better because Alexander Madison, a lot of his work and even in fantasy scoring was as a receiver. So you could have a little bit of shift here. Maybe Madison becomes available and he just lands on one of these teams as a cheap option and maybe goes elsewhere and also gets an opportunity. But yeah, Ty Chandler, I don't think will hold up. I think if the Vikings go anywhere, they're kind of rebooting and rebuilding this. I think they would go draft a back and put him with Chandler in this offense for sure.
Yeah, I think Jonathan Brooks would make a lot of sense for the Vikings here, but since they do, I mean, they're talking up Ty Chandler. They believe in him. Brooks is coming off an ACL tear. Who knows if he'll be ready at the start of the season? But if you believe in Ty Chandler, you wouldn't necessarily need him in week one, right? But then you still are drafting for the future. Ty Chandler's not your future in the backfield, right? Jonathan Brooks is a very, very talented running back coming out of Texas. I think he could be the Vikings' future. So maybe they spend a second rounder on him. Maybe he falls into the third with this ACL tear. We'll see. But with the Eagles, I think the guy that we're not talking about is J.K. Dobbins. Now, it's because he tore his Achilles in week one, and Achilles tears are so scary, especially at the running back position. We've seen Cam Akers come back rather quickly, and then tear his, was it his other one or same one? I think it was his other one. I don't really know what to take from that. We just don't have enough data yet on Achilles injuries in recent history with guys and how they come back. But I do think J.K. Dobbins with the Eagles could be a very interesting fit.
Yeah, and they could take another shot on an injured guy like they did last year, an off-injured guy. This guy is way more injured than DeAndre Swift. So I don't know. I think they need just a reliable runner. I mean, they also have Kenneth Gainwell, who they like to some degree. So maybe not looking too nuts, right, to invest and just need a power back. I mean, if they got away with Miles Sanders 2 years ago, they could get away with a lesser back. Maybe this is a landing spot for your guy, Zach Moss, or maybe they like Gus Edwards in a power role there that they put in Philadelphia instead of Dobbins. So I think there are a lot of possibilities for the Eagles' backfield. Again, Kellen Moore being there would say you want a little bit more dynamic, explosive back, and maybe that says, okay, we're going to try it again with Swift. But I think what you're looking for with the Eagles, again, they have to have a guy that's a little bit more of a dual threat. I think you'll see them open it up. The checkdowns may come a little bit more this year with the Kellen Moore versus their previous offense that they've had. So there's all kinds of possibilities. And I think that's the thing. There's the moving parts of that as well. With the Bengals, we talked about Chase Brown a little bit. I think they would give him a shot to get some key touches. They would probably add another back, but I think they're really high on Chase Brown should Joe Mixon go.
So to finish this tier here, so Chargers would be number 4 overall best landing spot in my mind. Then
Yeah.
Eagles, number
Yeah.
5. And then I do think it's very close between the Vikings and the Bengals for 6. Who would you put? Like, let's say the Bengals move on from Mixon. What do you think is the better landing spot for a running back, the Vikings or the Bengals?
I think the Bengals, just because, look, Joe Mixon was still a pretty good fantasy back last year. It wasn't exciting, but they're better offense, right? They're going to put up
Mhm.
more points probably overall. We don't know about the Vikings quarterback situation. They move on from Kirk Cousins. Definitely it's Joe Burrow and having T. Higgins probably returning now and Jamar Chase. I think they're just going to have more points available for this team. And I think if there's the receiving role that's available as well, I think that's going to be big here because Mixon again has had some of his best fantasy seasons in this offense with Joe Burrow. It's kind of interesting because we're talking about two offenses that are offshoots of the Rams there with Kevin O'Connell and Zach Taylor. So that should be interesting. But yeah, we definitely want to go to the more traditional running games, and we've seen that more with Harbaugh and Kelmore as former quarterbacks than we've seen with the Vikings and Bengals.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to finish out our top 10 in our last segment here for best landing spots. It gets a little rough in these final teams trying to figure out who belongs here in spots 8, 9, and 10, but it should be a fun conversation to have.
All right, yeah, we'll get there, and yeah, we'll see. I think we might disagree on some of this here in our final segment. All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With more than 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that big win. Keep your ride or die live at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, Michelle, we might disagree on this next team that we're going to look at. I guess it's our unofficial team number 7 here, but I'm going to say it's the Giants because if they move on from Saquon Barkley, it's down to Eric Gray, Gary Brightwell, Matt Breida. Not the greatest backfield here. I thought Gray would actually have a bigger role last year, but they were down on him. But this is going to be wide open, and maybe we'll get a James Cook type solution in this Bills type offense.
So I actually had them so far down. This is like the one
Yeah.
spot I'm like absolutely disgusted by. I mean, think about Barkley. He was good for fantasy, but super inconsistent, and he's a super talented guy. And so many receptions went into his fantasy points. I hate this offense so much. They had the third worst run blocking offensive line last year per PFF. Maybe they go through the draft. I don't know. I cannot see anybody going there that I get excited for. I'll say my number 8 is the Raiders, right? If Jacobs leaves. We're assuming these guys are leaving, right? So there's so many carries available. I know, Vinny, that you really like Samir White, but it's very rare for those guys to get a shot at lead back. I don't think they go into the season with Samir White as their guy. I think they bring in someone else. They kept Antonio Pierce now as their new head coach. He loves that defense. He's going to focus on the run game because we don't even know who the quarterback is going to be, right? But they do have good weapons in their offense, so it shouldn't be the worst offense ever. I kind of would really like DeAndre Swift here. I think he could have a nice role in this offense, maybe J.K. Dobbins if he's healthy. But there is a huge role in the Raiders offense, and I don't think they're the worst team ever. Like, they should put up some points. We'll see who their quarterback is, but I think they're the best spot.
Yeah, I mean, I do love Zamir White, and that's kind of why I have the Giants there. And the Giants are more just because of opportunity. They're not necessarily because the offense is great, but it could be much like the Vikings, right? Where we got into Alexander Madison because Dalvin Cook wasn't there. And the opportunity actually made him a decent fantasy play for much of the year because he was getting the goal line looks. Even if he was inefficient, he was still scoring. The same thing with Rashad White, right? He was extremely inefficient, but he caught balls. He was the only option. And if you're the only option, it's not pretty. I even go back to Damian Pierce 2 years ago. Like, you're going to rack up some numbers just by the volume alone in that backfield. So I think that's why more I had the Giants over any other team because I know exactly where the path to the volume is, right? So if Barkley's not there, there's going to be a void there. So, yeah, Zamir White, I think the one thing I would give pause is he looked good. I mean, with good volume down the stretch. So maybe they're looking for a more complimentary guy. But, yeah, I mean, Raiders, it's an intriguing backfield, but not the only one. We talked about the Chargers in the AFC West, but how about the Broncos? I don't know what's going to go on here. Like Samaje Perine was actually really effective as a receiver, much more so than Javonte Williams. Does Alvin Kamara get released and become available for Sean Payton? I don't know. Are they going to give Williams another shot? I'm just not sure what's going to happen here. So the Broncos might sneakily turn into the best option here if they blow up the backfield for Payton.
Yeah, it could. It's so interesting because like this is one of those offenses last year where there was, I mean, you had so much opportunity for carries there, but their offense was so bad that they couldn't stay in the field. They ranked 21st in running back carries last year. A lot of that because they were never on the field because their offense stunk. They did have the fourth best run blocking offensive line. So there is that. I don't know if I trust Sean Payton. I don't know who the quarterback's going to be. I don't know. I think that's kind of a
Yeah.
risky one. Um, like, would you say the Buccaneers or the Broncos would be a better landing spot? Because those were the two teams I was deciding between for my ninth best spot, and I think I leaned the Buccaneers here at the ninth spot. They were middle of the pack in running back carries. They were incredibly inefficient. But I think a lot of that had to do with they do have to fix up their offensive line for sure. That's something they have to do. But I also don't think Rachaad White is that guy to get 250 touches. Like he just or 250 carries. He shouldn't do that. They need to bring in more of a power back to go with Rachaad White. I will say Rachaad White's still going to be there. So he's going to take receptions. Maybe that hurts the fantasy running back, whoever lands there. But I think I feel a little bit more confident with the lead back with the Buccaneers than the Broncos.
Yeah, I think the Broncos have to clear some stuff here up, right? I mean, they could easily bring back Williams and Pirine and be okay with his backfield. And then there's obviously no value there that we're going to go after that's new, right? So the Buccaneers do have an opportunity here to go after power back. I think Rachaad White's role is pretty much going to stay the same. I don't think they want to give him too much workload, as you said. I think he could break down in that sense. I don't think he's that type of back. So we'll see. The other thing the Buccaneers need to do a little bit is be more committed to running the ball and make some improvements there with their offensive line. Liam Cohen might do that. So there's things that you can look at with this Bucks offense that we definitely want to have some upside with the backfield. I'm just worried about the receptions going away. Now, the last team we'll talk about, and right now it's hard to say any value is here because the Bears have a crowd. Dante Foreman is a free agent, but Khalil Herbert, Roshan Johnson, this was the hardest thing to figure out. You always said, okay, we're going to get some value from either of these guys. Then it will be a week where the Bears weirdly play with the lead. Foreman dominates. These two guys disappear. Then Roshan is catching passes. Khalil Herbert is looking good. So I just want the Bears to stick with one guy. This is just really maddening. So this is why I'm not sure, because you have Matt Eberflus still there controlling things as a defensive-minded coach. But the one thing that you might go away from the committee, no more Luke Getsy, right? You have now Shane Waldron in there. He had a lot of Kenneth Walker. It was still really Kenneth Walker's backfield a little bit more the last 2 years versus anyone else, Zach Charbonnet included. So this might maybe give us pause that this battle might be worth watching. I think you have Herbert. I think you have Johnson. I think you bring in someone else. And I think they're going to give the guy wins, so to speak, in training camp, the first shot at key touches here.
Yeah, I will say so the Bears were my number 10 spot, but I'm starting to reconsider here. I think maybe I'd put the Packers there because AJ Dillon's a free agent and it's just Aaron Jones who's getting older. He has trouble staying healthy. So, I mean, a lot of these teams are going to be a split backfield, right? That's where we're headed in today's NFL.
Yeah.
And this is a really nice offense, a nice landing spot. Maybe could be a landing spot for Tony Pollard where he can share the backfield with Aaron Jones. We've seen him be better when he shared one. And then if Aaron Jones were to go down, he'd have it by himself, have more volume. But I do think the Packers could be a really, really nice landing spot, even with Aaron Jones there. And we know he's still good, but aging. And then we'll see about the Browns, because if they do end up moving on from Nick Chubb, then they would obviously shoot up this list. But as long as Nick Chubb is there, then obviously not a great spot for anybody.
Yeah, there's a lot of backfields going crazy here. And the interesting thing is supply and demand of having so many running backs. Last year, there was a good rookie class. So that kind of hurt all the running backs that are on the veteran market. Now the veteran market has kind of disappointed, but now there's not a lot of rookie running backs that stand out and a lot of teams with needs. So supply and demand is kind of going the other way here with the back. So maybe you'll see a big carousel. And I think that's what's going to happen here. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have to break down a lot of guys, a new fantasy football value in a new offense. So many things have changed as well. Schemes have changed. Personnel keeps on changing. So that's why you got to stick with us here on Locked On Fantasy Football. We're going to keep you up through all of it here in the off season. So just starting to break down all the stuff. And once we have landing spots, it's going to be a lot easier to break down, I think, Michelle.
I love the offseason. I love the change. I love free agency. I love the draft. I'm so excited. That is it for today's show. Thank you to all of you for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every dayers, Vinny and I will be back tomorrow discussing our top 10 landing spots for free agent and rookie wide receivers. You won't want to miss it. Bye, y'all.